Around the pandemic, Anna Kasparian seemed to become focused on the issue of homelessness, especially in a city that I used to call home, which is San Francisco. She had an objectively scary experience with an unhoused person, and in fact, I went back to see when she told her audience about this. And I do remember the day that Anna told the story on air. In fact, I was also on after she told that story, but I didn't hear it at the time. It was within an interview that she was doing with an author by the name of Michael Shellenberger, who had written the book San Francisco: Why Progressives Are Ruining Cities. Instead of focusing on housing market prices, on how homelessness often leads to things like addiction and mental illness, Shellenberger focuses on Democrats who thinks go too easy on the unhoused. I remember that I jumped onto the show right after he got off, after that interview, and the TYT audience was really pissed because they felt like the framing and the platforming of someone like Shellenberger was a disservice to the issue of homelessness, mental illness, and addiction. Anna apparently took that.
I have to interrupt because I know San Francisco, and I lived in San Francisco properly. Shellenberger is a piece of garbage. Like, let me just say that like up front. He is reactionary. He is horrifying. And what he does and how he sets up all of this stuff is like, oh, the progressives failed with all of their policies. The problem isn't, he literally says that it's not housing or money for social programs. Instead, it's the progressive lawmakers who have permanent supportive housing in San Francisco that have done this, that overfund shelters, which San Francisco does not do.
What it's for is to give people who hate homeless people, bluntly, an excuse to feel good about themselves, being very angry at the expert on the television, the rare moment that they come up, when they say, well, we need to actually give these people the things that they need in order to live like fulfilling lives and to get off the streets and to get better and so on and so forth. Because the fact of the matter is they would rather them be executed.
Well, I don't know if he coined the term, but he's used it a lot. And it's this idea of victimology. And you hear it a lot. I don't know if he's the guy who came up with it, but it's that thing that the right does where they talk about how by creating these programs and making people who are victims of society, what you're doing is teaching them to be victims of society.
Well, victimology is specifically the study of victimization. It is an actual thing. But
no, he uses it in this particular way. That's okay. What I mean is he's playing with it, not victimology in the sense of like what the word means, but like he's
I get you.
He's a piece of shit. I fucking hate him. And I did not know that he was on TYT. It makes 100% sense for Anna to do that at this point, honestly. But I can tell you, after living in San Francisco, the issues with San Francisco are the zoning laws. And we can kind of end there. Zoning laws, the overall programs for people are not overfunded. They're underfunded. There's not nearly enough of them. There just isn't enough affordable housing. And because things are zoned the way that they are, and because of the wealthy landowners who control most of the space in there, they're never going to change. San Francisco is fucking the worst kind of NIMBY bullshit that exists. And it's 100% the neoliberal wealthy class that did it.
The homeless population has exploded in the United States in recent years, certainly during the pandemic, where
I hate her so much now.
We have seen encampments grow larger and suffering on honestly every street corner in places like Los Angeles and San Francisco. One thing that's undeniable, though, is the prevalence of severe mental illness and also deaths from drug overdoses. These are things that are studied. These are things that are provable through data. Yet it's something that seems to be ignored by the very advocates who claim to care about the well-being and welfare of those who end up on the streets. So let's take a look at the numbers. The Los Angeles Times examined more than 4,000 questionnaires taken as part of 2019's point-in-time count and found that about 76% of individuals living outside on the streets reported being or were observed to be affected by mental illness, substance abuse, poor health, or a physical disability.
What is she saying here? This stat seems exceptionally meaningless. I want to talk to the 24% of people who are on the streets who have perfect health, no disabilities, no substance abuse, and no mental illness. I want to know that dude, because I've done work in the space. Not a lot of that. 24% are like totally cool. That's a lot. That's 1 in 4.
I
That
guess.
doesn't.
Well, hang on. Wait. See, I understand it. I get it. I see what they're saying now. So it's a subtle but important point. Okay. 76% of individuals living outside on the streets reported being or were observed. Okay, so those 24%, they weren't observed. They couldn't find them.
They're Schrodinger's homeless.
Exactly.
Yeah, the unobservable homeless. We don't know whether they're housed or unhoused at any given time.
I think we don't know if they're doing drugs.
That would be a great horror movie.
Now, that is a broad range of categories, as you can see, right? So let's get a little more specific. Individually, substance abuse affects 46% of those living on the streets.
That's because people on the streets need something to deal with it. And I got to tell you, you go sleep on the streets for a few days and just see if you want a joint or a drink or crack.
Or because if you're dealing with something else, you can be very prone to addiction, and so you can fall into being homeless and not have cured the thing that made you homeless in the first place. So what are you going to do? Well, sometimes you need that stuff actually to function, because your body develops a dependency on it. It's a weird thing about drugs. They're addictive.
But is she doing the thing? Like, and she does a lot of things, and she never really makes a point, but is she doing the thing where she's saying, see, they have substance abuse. They're broken. We can't help them. Is that the...
More than 3 times the rate previously reported. And mental illness, including post-traumatic stress disorder, affects 51% of those living on.
Here's the thing. If she doesn't mention the public initiatives that are taken in order to make it so that they can continue to work with their addiction safely, so like safe injection sites and so on and so forth, and then programs to help get them housed and help to get them off of their addictions, which is very expensive and difficult to do, by the way, which is one of the reasons why homeless people in particular are in one of the worst positions possible to get out of addiction. Because if you've never seen someone who's getting out of an addiction to something really hard, this is the age of the internet. You can look it up. It is not pretty. It is not pretty.
It's not fun. I babysat my cousin for 2.5 days as he got off meth for the first time. And that was genuinely unenjoyable.
Yeah.
And for me, it was unenjoyable. For him, it was a living nightmare that never ended as far as his brain was concerned, really.
If she just mentions all the bad things that homeless people do and then doesn't talk about there being systemic causes for it that require institutional and systemic responses besides just penalization, because literally all that is doing is taking your homeless population with all of their problems and shipping them somewhere else to be someone else's problem, then she is doing the thing by default. She doesn't even need to nudge, wink, wink.
On the streets, according to the analysis. And as we've shared on the show before, the number of drug overdoses has also exploded, especially during the pandemic. It is incredibly heartbreaking. And these numbers I'm about to share with you are actually a little outdated. They're from 2019. But here's what we know. Drug overdoses have been the lead.
So let's take it on its face. It's TYT. I have to assume. Let's just play lefty while we're here, because we don't know what's happening. Okay. And let's do that. And let's say at this point, this is just showing reason for me personally. This is just showing reasons to have empathy and care about these people and how they're in a position built by their material conditions. That's all that she's talked about so far, right?
What I'm actually hearing is, here, let me layer on the cover. Oh yes, it's absolutely heartbreaking. And it's going to wind up exactly where we talked about before.
Oh no, I'm sure, but I'm play acting. Like, oh, yes, these are very much reasons to care about the unhoused and the position that they're in and how horrifying it is. I agree with that. Let's see where you go with it.
I don't think they are. I think as soon as you're talking about things that people immediately impute to, tell your kids not to do this. If they do this, they become bad. You think, oh, these people did a bad thing, and that's where your mind is at.
Oh, I know.
You talk about, you stack it in the other direction. You work like this. People who are homeless face issues with addiction and so on and so forth that prevent them from getting out of homelessness. Not people who are homeless, they're doing lots of drugs. They're doing lots of drugs all over. 75% of them are doing drugs. It's like, okay. Yeah.
Leading cause of death among the homeless in Los Angeles County
You know
since
what? You know what
2017.
drug overdoses being the leading cause of death means for these people? It's, yeah, homeless people are dying, but it's because it's their own fault. They're doing it.
For me, it means that people who are in these positions are extremely at risk because they're in a marginalized position that puts them in the place to be at risk. So because they are so much more at risk, this is the level of which people who are housed have a significant, here is the number. A person experiencing homelessness is 36 times more likely to die of a drug overdose than a person in Gen Pop. That thing, it means that this is an extremely vulnerable community that we must care about. I'm going to assume Anna is going to agree with me.
Well, that's because you're going to assume that Anna is not interviewing the author of San Francisco.
Oh, no, I've not.
Tell
me about this book. I've not heard of it. I'm sure it's a great, that San Francisco's ill and there are things that need to be fixed. I'm sure.
I hate this pantomime so much, you have no idea.
Increasing 84% between 2016 and 2019. According to the county, a person experiencing homelessness is 36 times more likely to die of a drug overdose than a person in the general population. Now, recently in San Francisco, Mayor London Breed declared a state of emergency over drug overdose deaths among the city's homeless. In fact, drug-related fatalities are on the rise and outpaced COVID deaths in the city last year by 2 to 1.
I don't doubt. I lived at 6th and Folsom. You feel free to look it up. I lived at 6th and Folsom, and I'd walk Market Street almost every day, get some coffee, get some food. Yeah, I buy this. I've walked around dead bodies. They were there. People overdosing in the middle of the street is horrifying.
This is real.
It's a real thing.
This is happening. But for some reason, just bringing this up tends to be one of the most taboo things you could imagine online. Ignoring this problem.
Really? I haven't experienced that. Have you?
No.
I am not experienced. When I talk about homelessness online, I don't get a taboo experience.
I'm just like, with who? What are you saying? Who is protesting that thing that you just posted?
I think most people are perfectly fine with him talking about homelessness. I wonder what she's talking about.
Problem doesn't make it go away. And I also want to be fair to the advocates who are a little afraid of talking about these issues. They're worried about stigmatizing, they're worried about stereotyping, and I think that is a legitimate concern to have. But unless we actually address the reality on the ground, unless we can properly diagnose what the issue is, we're not able to provide the services or the solutions necessary.
This is like, you know what this is like? This is like a newscaster who got caught in his bedroom with another woman when his wife came home, and then immediately goes on air the next day and starts talking about how just prejudice against non-traditional and poly relationships is just such a rampant issue in America. Nobody can talk about it. You can't even have a conversation. Okay, just everyone's so close-minded. That's what it's like.
There's The Onion has that. They used to do the video series, and they have the one where it's the table where it's like getting the opinions of all the different people, and it's like, I'm Raybert. Today's discussion: what are great ways for you to hide a body if you've hit it in the middle of the night after drinking too much of it at a party? And it's like, it's kind of that feeling where they're like, what? Well, I guess you can. That would be a good idea, but what if it turned out that when you hit the body, it was actually a small child? It's like it's just 100% like self-telling the whole time. It feels like she's doing this thing immediately. Like, I could try in good faith as long as I can, but now she's clearly screaming like, hey, these aren't things I have empathy for. These are things that are themselves the problem when they are literally symptoms. She considers them causes. Like, that's the end of the discussion as far as her leftism or progressive ideology goes. If she sees drug use and drug deaths for homeless people as a cause and not a symptom, we don't need you to hand in your card. Like you never were a member.
Well, it explains why they're getting on so swimmingly with people like Brianna Wu, for example. Yeah, can't get along with his own nephew, but Brianna Wu, they're still tight. Brianna Wu is like cheering on deportation of green card holders. It's like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I mean,
I think this
racist.
is what, because here's the thing. This is what the Young Turks are, and I mean Cenk and Anna. I don't mean everyone. Okay, obviously they got a lot of like actual progressives working for them. Not anymore. They're squeezing
Fewer
those
and
out
fewer.
fast. But here's the thing. Back around the time when Trump was elected, okay, there was a giant conspiracy theory about the left controlling all of the institutions. Okay, big progressive Palpatines like George Soros. They were pouring in millions of dollars, and just everything was being controlled by this progressive agenda. And you had people who were like, "Oh, this is terrible. There's all these horrible progressives. There's all these millions of dollars that are billions of dollars that are clamping down on free speech and not letting us talk about obvious truths like the difference between men and women, and women are just generally less strong than men, and maybe like spending all day at home with babies cooking. Some women do, as a matter of fact, and so on and so forth." And then there were other people who went, "Oh no, progressives are running the world. They've got billions of dollars, and I could be getting some." And they did the exact same thing. And their attitude was not, "These are my principles. I really care about this kind of thing. I'm going to start advocating for these particular things." It's like, no, there's market demand for this, and I'm going to meet it. And so as soon as it became the case that the tide shifted, they preempted, because they already knew what they were doing before and why. And as soon as they felt that the winds were turning, they're like, "Oh, my spider sense is tingling." And they shifted preemptively. Early, because they thought they were smart.
100%.
But actually, here's the thing: they were stupid to think that in the first place. And so now they're tanking, because what they've basically done is they've taken an organically built audience that took a lot of time to build faith with, a really strong network of people that they worked with who had really strong values, and they've shattered it all, because they thought it would just recreate itself as soon as they started shifting rightward. But it didn't.
They really, and again, the challenge is that when you stop looking at things systemically, when you stop looking at how the whole thing works and where the problems exist and how you can actually fix things, and you instead move to that thing is ew, that is gross, that is bad, we must stop that. And that becomes a stopping point, like drug use, overdoses, homelessness. That's the thing. We just fix that, everything else goes away. Crime is an ew, bad. We just need to stop that, and everything else fixes. That mental state puts you in the place of being a reactionary. And it's really awful to see. That's it.
To keep people healthy and alive. Simply allowing people to die on our sidewalks is not acceptable. It is.
I agree. We should have free needle programs. We should decriminalize drugs, and we should have areas where people are completely safe to do them. Open air drug use areas that are staffed by medical doctors and nurses to take care of them as they're learning and making the transition and hopefully getting the treatment they need. I agree with her, right? That's what she's going to argue, right?
Horacio made a great point, actually, by the way. You know who else George Soros funded? Viktor Orban. Paid for his education. It's amazing.
Yeah, Soros is apparently this hyper lefty. I got to tell you.
That's why he named his organization after a book by Karl Popper, because he's a hyper lefty. Yeah. He loves Marx.
The Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, which conducts its own annual report, interpreted the data to produce much lower numbers. So they do their own. And so when you compare the Los Angeles Times and its analysis to the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, you'll notice a significant difference. In its presentation of the results to elected officials, the agency said only 29% of the homeless population had either a mental illness or substance abuse disorder, and therefore 71% did not have a serious mental illness and or report substance.
The language of this is really interesting to me, that she's pulling from this as she is, because serious mental illness and or reported substance use disorder is different than like the other stat she had, and she's using this to like upturn that last one, right?
No, that word disorder is really important because that's a diagnosed condition, not just drug use. Moreover, there
And
is something else
serious
here.
mental illness, serious is a qualifier too.
I'd have to listen again to what you said leading up to this as well, but there's an additional factor here which people don't tend to keep in mind. When people talk about the homeless, you have to be very careful of what they're counting as homeless. So, for example, a lot of homeless stats in Canada don't just count people who are wearing like old jackets with patches on with a stick with a pouch with their belongings on it, and probably some kind of sentient woodland critter following them around, giving sage advice to youngsters who've run away from home. It's also talking about families that are like insecurely housed. So, for example, who are house hopping, sleeping on couches, and so on and so forth, who probably have never slept on the streets in their life before. However, they're
100%
housed. So it's like sometimes it looks like, oh, well, it's good. Addictions are down. It's like, but hang on. With whom? Who are you talking about? Are you talking about people who are living on the streets, or are you talking about people who don't have a home? Because there's a distinction here. It's subtle, but it's important because it's not subtle when you're in it.
Well, there's also, when you're talking about these different cities, in San Diego, by the way, I think you would even see there is going to be a divergence of people who are just more open to, like, you know, there are people who choose to be more homeless. These exist. There's through anger, through personal choice, this exists. And that thing gets more real when like all year in San Diego is like 90 degrees and kind of, you know, nice. That thing of sleeping around outdoors, not San Francisco. I'm saying like San Diego, and like the differences across
I was going to say,
California.
sleeping around outdoors in San Francisco isn't just a homeless thing, but continue.
Well, that reality of what it means to be in these different places and the causes and this, again, one of the things that's really important when doing this work, and the studies back this, is talking about what it means for a person to be homeless and what the boundaries are to that. And the detriment that being homeless has on a person. And by doing so, people, and for example, Alaska has a lot fewer homeless people because you'll die. So the desperation or the way that people take advantage of shelters is much more active. There's more money put into it, but also there's a lot different types of infrastructure. People will sleep on each other's, bunk beds. They'll take any work because otherwise death is there. Sleeping outside for a little bit in San Francisco, you'll be, I can survive it. It's going to be bad. Versus San Diego, it's a different beast. Again, the thrust behind the unique person that is going through this and what it means for them. Are they sleeping in their cars? The Silicon Valley, it was very normal to sleep in your car for a very long time. They counted those people at the time as unhoused, but they were engineers at like major firms. They just couldn't afford, the $10,000 a month rent. So it's very strange language. And again, a lot of this is when you start going through that thing of finding studies that make your point rather than trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Substance use disorder. For example, and this is
Cool
this
if
is
I
the
jump to the interview?
Yeah, please.
cities. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Anna.
So Michael, I actually want to start off discussing just briefly the title of your book, because I've read your book, and in it, I think you make an important point, an important distinction.
If you cover up his face with your hand, you can pretend he's 6 years old.
In terms of what is being
This guy has the
advocated for.
forehead and the haircut of a 6-year-old. It's very strange.
Oh no, I know this haircut. This is California, man. There's a unique groups of people
By homeless advocates, which is really this libertarian policy. So on one hand, you define it as libertarian, but then you blame it on progressivism, at least in your title, and then a little bit throughout your book as well. Why do you do that?
Sure, and let me just start by saying that I come from the radical left. In the late 1990s, I worked for George Soros's foundation to advocate drug
Reminders. I'm sorry. It's just. It's almost like people.
We did not pre-watch this.
No, we didn't.
That's fucking insane that's what he says. Of all fucking things for him to say that.
It's almost like they're all just in it for the money.
By the way, if you work at a fund and you come out against like lefty policies, we don't really need to know a lot more about you. Like, That's a thing, you know? I was radical left. That's why I worked at a fund.
Decriminalization. I worked with Maxine Waters to advocate needle exchange, organizing civil rights leaders. I still support the decriminalization of marijuana. I have always favored a rehabilitation.
Wait, he organized civil rights leaders? What?
He organized with civil rights leaders. Maxine Waters.
I don't think he said with. I think he just said he organized civil rights leaders.
Sure, and let me just start by saying that I come from the radical left. In the late 1990s, I worked for George Soros's foundation to advocate drug decriminalization. I worked with Maxine Waters to advocate needle exchange, organizing civil rights leaders.
Organizing I still support the civil rights leaders.
Yeah.
He's the guy who's pulling the strings. Okay, he's telling them all where to go and what to do. Not organized with, organizing civil rights leaders. Yeah.
We can do a deep dive into him, but he's sucked my entire life. Like, he's someone who I've known about since like mid 2000s. Like, this is a person who's been in politics as, you know, the archetype of the why I left the left person. He's one of the first. Like, he was environmentalism is so important, but the radical environmentalists are going too far. That was actually how he got big.
It works too rhetoric. It works rhetorically, and I get it. But it's also like when you think about it for 5 seconds, it is kind of strange. Yeah, I devoted my life to a fraud ideology. You should trust my judgment and what I have to say about complicated social issues. I can get bought off by anyone with $1 million. Like, that's what that means. Like this. I was a radical leftist before I suddenly completely reversed course on every single belief when, by just some coinkydink, other billionaires started pumping money in the other direction, and I saw that I could get a taste. Like,
yeah, he's something, man.
Decriminalization of marijuana. I have always favored a rehabilitation approach rather than a criminal justice approach, and I still believe that. I also support more housing. In fact, I wrote a column in 2019 calling for more housing, an emergency declaration by the governor of California for more housing.
Who doesn't? No more housing. We don't need any more houses. No more houses. Stop building houses. No houses.
Just to quote him, I've been grabbing quotes just because they're fun to litter things in as we go. I'm a liberal in my compassion for the vulnerable, libertarian in my passion for freedom, conservative in my belief that civilization is required for both. It's an actual statement this person has said out loud and not been like, oh, wait, that came out wrong. I meant to fart.
But as soon as I did, I had a number of people email me and say, hey, you can't just describe the people living in open drug scenes, what we call homeless encampments on Skid Row in LA or the Tenderloin in San Francisco, as simply not being able to afford the rent. This is a problem that's driven by drug addiction and untreated mental illness.
And just so you know, because he's now talking about stuff that he's studied and studies and blah, blah, blah. When he did that shift, and it's what he was famous for, was as I said, the environmentalists have just gone too far. It's not that serious, blah, blah, blah. And I attached to it because I kind of, he at the time was advocating for, refreshing nuclear power, returning to that, finding safe alternatives, blah, 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 which I agreed with that. But then it became clear as his institute or whatever was putting out studies that it was just made up. Like he was just lying, and his shit has been debunked countless times.
Okay, let me. By the way, hang on. So here's let me see if there's a source for this here. Give me a sec. Oh shit. One moment. Hold the thought. Don't change anything.
I'm here. You're good.
Good. Better be. Okay. All right. So. San Francisco. I'm not going to pull up the actual book, but explicitly in the book, Shellenberger argues that homelessness is not primarily the result of poverty and the shortage of affordable housing. It is, he claims, really a problem of mental health. So even here he's being weasel wordy because, yeah, he's for more houses. He's just not for poor people houses.
Yeah.
So it's like this is why I'm saying like, and somebody mentioned like NIMBYs. NIMBY means not in my backyard. NIMBYs have no issue with more houses. They just don't want houses with poor people in them near them. Subtle but important difference. Yes, it does mean being against houses in principle, but they're not. They don't understand that because they're selfish and demented.
Yeah, again, he made his bones doing what, and that's why I think Francesca bringing him up it's very telling, because
Yes.
I think she sees the same thing that what Anna's doing, because his whole thing was he became, after his years of environmental work, which was ostensibly quite good. I mean, as far as, you can tell, or as far as it goes. But he became the guy who would go on Fox News, and the bottom thing on Fox News would always say things like, climate alarm, regrets his role in climate alarmism. Like, he's that guy. He's the shill. He's one of the first shills, because we're talking like 2004 or 5. Like, this was early shill. This was early shilling.
No, this is exactly like when Brianna Wu, who once again campaigned for a segregationist when she was in college, happens to talk to Richard Hanania and just gets along swimmingly. You know, Richard, I've always thought that we have a lot in common. And he does that for however long. It's the exact same deal. She's not going to come out and say, like, look, I think that all of the homeless people should be rounded up into large crates, put onto a barge, and sunk in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. What she's going to do is she's going to bring on someone who says, well, she's going to say, like, oh, the homeless issue is so heartbreaking and difficult. Here, I've brought on celebrated author Michael Shellenberger to discuss the problems and why progressives aren't willing to actually, like, look at the real hard solutions to these problems. It's like, well, I started off as a radical leftist, and I was paid by George Soros, and I've volunteered my daughters to the sexual emergency clinic in England, and but I'm all for money and houses. Money and houses are good.
And also remember, she lied and said she was a game developer.
Yeah.
Like, she has nothing to do with, she never had anything to do with game development. She never worked in game development. And what she did by taking that position, and this is why I think it's especially...
You're to Brianna Wu, to be clear. We've moved back to Brianna Wu.
Brianna Wu, sorry.
I was talking about Anna Kasparian here.
She sucks too. But Brianna Wu was never a game developer. And by claiming that role and claiming this thing during that period, she actually sidelined women who really had a lot to say. Brenda Braithwaite, who I'm proud to call a friend. Amy Henning, who I don't, because I don't know her. But there's...
Proud to call her not a friend, are you? Okay,
I haven't worked with her. But there's an extraordinary number of women who are like old heads and women who are trying to break into games right now who could have taken that place and could have been really honest about how, and it is awful in video games, but when you don't work at a games company your entire life and you don't understand what it's like to try to get into games because you never had to try to get into games, that thing that you're now advocating for is so disconnected from the vital real world life that people are leading that you don't help with advocacy in any meaningful way. It's one of the things that was most disgusting about everything she did is she kept taking on these facades of a person who's persecuted for thing X when she's not that thing, nor does she care. It's just self-aggrandizement at all. And it doesn't actually move forward at anything that happens. It's horrifying. It's horrifying. Piece of garbage.
Oh, that's John Romero's wife.
Yes. I prefer to say he's Brenda's husband.
It's fair. Has he made anything in the last forever?
John's worked on good stuff. They have a game company together. They put out a game with their kid. John put out a game with his kid. Brenda worked on, and then they've got a couple of titles.
I feel like the last thing I heard about him, and I was kind of surprised he was working on this, was the Gauntlet 7 Soros game, which was weird to me.
He's got a bunch of stuff he's touched into. I can't talk about the stuff he's currently doing, but it's cool. Brenda, and I say this with all love, John, if you ever see this, I say this with all love, and you know this. I think Brenda is fucking brilliant. Like genuinely probably one of the more interesting minds who's ever touched games. Worth looking into the stuff she's done. Really. Mostly her more experimental
Playboy the
stuff.
Mansion?
No. Hey, you got to pay the bills. Tree or Trains as the two most interesting like real world. interactive.
By the way,
things.
she did the writing for Jagged Alliance. If anyone's ever played that, which is really good.
Dude, she fucking programmed like the first Dungeons and Dragons game, like in the 80s, like early 80s. She's been around. She's been around. I think she did AD&D. What was the title of it? The subtitle? She's fucking been around. She's been around for forever.
No, it was Wizardry. It wasn't D&D. It was Wizardry.
She did Wizardry?
Yeah, it was Wizardry. Realms of Arcania. Is that a D&D one?
She's done a lot of shit.
That is. I think that is D&D actually. Realms of Arcana is. Wait.
She's been around. And when you talk about again,
no, it was a competitor of Dungeons and Dragons. What did she?
She got to be a part of and watch, and this is she gave a talk at GDC. My number one reason why, and it was a whole bunch of women talking about their issues and what's going on in games, and she gave a lot of talks on what it was like to be a woman, because she kind of went through this really early time where it wasn't settled that it was a men's space. It was kind of switching to that, but she got to watch it completely change and become this like very testosterone fueled nightmare fest. And the talks she gives on it are incredible, genuinely incredible. It's worth looking up her talks. Brenda Romero now.
It'll probably be Brenda Romero on YouTube if you're looking for it.
It won't be, because most of her talks were before they got married.
Okay, well there you go.
So Braithwaite. Again, just search up Brenda Braithwaite. You don't have to spell it correctly, and Train, and just read about Train.
Yeah, but also though, YouTube is younger than their marriage, so they might still be calling her Romero because the people who post might be thinking of her as Romero.
Never know. But anyway, my point overall, the reason I've always had a little bit of animosity, and it's a significant amount, it's to anyone who kind of takes that thing and claims it for themselves when they're disconnected from the industry they're
and then just
for.
By the way, just smears it for everybody else, because the stuff she produced by essentially exploiting other workers to make a shitty game that she had poor communication, poor design on, because she hired people who knew what they were doing, and then just was impossible to work with. Ex-employees have spoken out about this. Like just made it look like anyone who says, "Oh, I'm a game developer," is just like full of shit. Like when people talk about the grifters of Gamergate and whatnot, and like from the other side, their point of reference is Zoe Quinn and Brianna Wu. Nobody remembers anybody else. Sarkeesian didn't really make games. I don't think. She just commented on them. And it's like, wow. I played Revolution 60 on stream. It is so bad.
Anita had an academic specific thing she was doing, and I actually really appreciated it. And she did not deserve.
She got done dirty. She got done really.
Well, she got done dirty because what she got done with is someone like a Brianna Wu, who puts herself in the center, colors everyone else, who continually puts herself in that place, colors everyone else. And so Anita doesn't get to just be Anita, who's a pretty smart, doing a very particular thing, really well spoken, and trying to make a more simplistic, hey, let's talk about theory through video games thing, which, by the way, like, it's fine. She didn't even try to do like crazy weird theory like we talk about Bataille and shit when it comes to like, it's insane to do. It's just feminism. But the shit she got is because it was this larger like, oh, I'm getting death threats, I'm this and blah blah blah, and it's like these other people are actually getting those, trying to produce real work, trying to live in that space, and trying to talk about real problems. And they're real problems. It's a thing. Back when I was working on Avatar, I tried to hire women. I always tried to hire women in games. And it's sure, call it affirmative action. I don't care, because my challenge is it's the same thing as everything. Women make up half of all people. And if I want to make something that's broad, that's able to hit to a lot of people and make something that's good, I need to have people who are part of a broader group than just myself.
Brooks is in fact half woman, by the way.
I mean, more or less. But that thing is necessary from like a purely capitalist perspective, but also I find it really innervating to have people who have disagreements or different life experiences with me, because it causes us to have really interesting takes. It's my team that made Hero, the one that my piece that I'm going to hold up the rest of my life, because I won Sundance and fucking Tribeca Film Festival, was made with a team that was half women. And Like that thing, there was me and one other guy was the white people on it. Like that's it. Like this piece was able to be made because it was conflicting people who were ready to work together and do great things. And this is hard to find. It's just hard to find women who can do the work because they haven't had the experience, because no one will hire them, because it's hard to find women. It's a nightmare. And sorry, it just makes me angry every time Brianna Wu like is brought up. It's like, this is the thing we never got to discuss because it became about her.
But it's okay. The story has a happy ending. Afterwards, she used her position as a left-wing, as a pseudo left-winger in collaboration with the Young Turks to then shit on all those people that she was trying to use to up-jump herself earlier. It's fucking ridiculous.
I interviewed one of the major homeless service providers in Los Angeles what percentage of people he thought living on the streets were suffering from substance use disorder, which is what we call addiction these days. And he said 100%. And I thought that sounded crazy high. So I thought maybe he was conservative. So I interviewed a very progressive woman who became a character, a real.
Again, if that answer, like these are self-reports.
Yes.
Hey, how many people who are living on the street have substance abuse? Fuck, I think all of them. And your answer is, wow, that guy just wants to make the homeless look bad. If
hey, here's a question.
You go,
yeah. Here's a question for you. How many people who aren't homeless do you think have substance abuse issues in America today? Probably a fair amount, actually. Now, it depends on what you're talking about because, we largely don't count some drugs. But like I would wager almost everybody is supplementing themselves with some kind of chemical at some level. Yeah. People are even by the way, caffeine. Because you know what some people do instead of cocaine? They take caffeine pills. Fucks with your heart. You do it too much. You take too much. People actually like kill themselves.
5 hour energy like
over the
kills
counter.
Your liver actively. Like it's a horrifying thing.
Yes. Alcohol. Are you an alcoholic? No. Guess what? You don't have to be to get liver disease. Just so you know. You don't have to be an alcoholic to be dependent either. Just so you know. You can, for example, find yourself requiring like just a steady like constant of the stuff that is harming you, that is actually causing you to be more sluggish, weaker, and sicker over time, just to cope. And are you clinically an alcoholic? No. You can quote unquote stop any time, but you won't, and you're still hurting yourself, so on and so forth. Like it's across the board. So the idea that homeless people suddenly would have this large chunk of people who are just like clean living or whatever, it's like they don't have the luxury.
I'm going to skip ahead a bit because I want to get to like I want to get to the conclusions that Anna draws with this person more than anything, and then we'll get back. I only want to do like another 30 seconds of this.
Yeah.
To work. On one hand, there's the policing issue, which desperately needs to be reformed. And I would argue that in order to reform policing, you actually have to use a little more funding and ensure that you're hiring the right people, you're training the right people. And then on the other hand, when it comes to universal psychiatry, I mean, that takes a considerable amount of resources as well. You're correct in stating that a place like California has the resources necessary to make it happen. But I'm curious, is there any movement working toward that as we speak?
Very significant movement. And in fact, there's been a really lovely history, a secret history in some ways, or little known history of Republicans and Democrats working together to expand mental health care. It's an issue that had been shrouded in shame and taboo for many decades. But there is a law in the books that says that we need what's called so-called parity in terms of health insurance providers, including the government, providing equal treatment for mental health issues as well as physical health issues. The system hasn't responded in the way that it needs to, in part.
This is all cover for right-wing shit. It's incredible. It's just depressing, Sunday. It really is.
Let's go back to Francesca,
who had written the book San Francisco, Why Progressives Are Ruining Cities. Instead of focusing on housing market prices,
how just absolutely shitty that title is. It's such trash. San Francisco, really?
It is one of those things that's clever at first blush and then annoying at second.
That is not clever at first blush. That is.
It's like, oh, San Francisco. That was, yeah.
on how homelessness often leads to things like addiction
What if
and
we
mental
called them
illness.
Republicans?
Schellenberger focuses on
That's a
Democrats
level.
who think
That's not clever.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Are you going to trademark it?
go too
You
easy
can.
on the unhoused. I remember that I jumped onto the show right after he got off, after that interview, and the TYT audience was really pissed because they felt like the framing and the platforming of someone like Shellenberger was a disservice to the issue of homelessness, mental illness, and addiction.
That is a
Anna
fair
apparently
thing.
took that as the chat downplaying what happened to her rather than how the issues were
course.
presented. She's since gone on right-wing shows like Glenn Beck, Piers Morgan, and Jillian Michaels, among others, to retell
Such
the
an Adam,
story
like bottom of the
and
barrel
use it
stuff.
as
Not even channels. Just going on to like right-wing YouTube channels just to scrape. Anyway, like, hey, Adam, such an Adam. I've always thought that actually we had a lot in common. It's the Brianna Wu thing. It's just like, have some fucking
If I can say
dignity.
about Jillian Michaels a good thing, I can. She has the single best guest appearance on Eric Andre that there ever was. Just to mention, if you get a chance, it's the best Eric Andre appearance of anyone, period, I think. Not for her, but it's pretty great.
I stood next to her and told her how annoying that was and just tried to build her up in solidarity. Then in 2019, we went out to lunch in Los Angeles at an awesome spot that she knew of. And Anna confided to me that she was frustrated about leadership at
Share the awesome spot next time.
TYT. How she wasn't involved in day-to-day decision-making and how Cenk viewed her more as a kid sister rather than a co-equal partner. And at the time, she wanted to branch out on her own and do videos on a new channel. I implored her at that moment to stay. I said that it's always women that tend to walk away from organizations even when they've helped build them up to the point that
100%.
they're at. I told her to fight for more of a decision-making role and to not walk away. And she did. And it looks like the editorial decisions that we see being made at TYT are in part because she now has the reins. In a way, I'm proud of her, even if I don't like the coverage. In November of last year, in an effort to understand where Anna was coming from and why she was doing what she was doing, I invited her to come on my show, The Bituation Room. She agreed, but also told me that she had a family emergency that sounded bad, and I told her to not worry and that we would find a time in the new year. That week, she went on Glenn Beck's show, and it kind of puzzled me, to be honest. She obviously now is likely not going to come on my show, in part because Cenk did. And I wanted to talk to him about his own very cordial conversations with the right since the election or re-election of Donald Trump.
We should watch that.
In
We
which
should
he
watch that
tells
clip.
various figures.
We can also, he's got, Cenk put out a video explaining why he's removing Francesca too. We've got that in line if you want.
We'll do both. Let's do that one and then let's watch the conversation.
We're going to do some, it's a TYT day.
From Charlie Kirk
tit
to
day.
Patrick Bet-David to Tim Pool to RFK Jr. lover, again, Jillian Michaels. About how he agrees that the left is often cruel and too extreme, saying that at a time where people are literally being disappeared for their political beliefs by this right-wing agenda. Anyone can watch the discussion. I put it in the link below, and it's honestly just a really disturbing portrait of his very with me or against me mentality. I even foreshadowed in the video the idea that he would boot me from TYT one day, and he did. It was also staggering how much he was shadowboxing with me as some kind of stand-in for the max left that has lost their minds. In that video, he laughed at me for suggesting that Trump would create detention camps. After the discussion in December, TYT main show never asked me back on. And then when I made a harmless little video pointing out that yes, there are detention camps, that seemed to be one of the final straws. Personally, Cenk and I were never close. In 2022, I think we went out to lunch and he asked me if I wanted to work with TYT full-time. And it gave me pause. Look, I work with a number of outlets. I am a stand-up comedian. I value my free time, and I have my own show. I wanted time to do those things, but also I pay through the nose for things like healthcare, and a little bit of job stability would be amazing. I also know how hard the company works people who work there, and I know how it treated the union drive. I also know how much they deny full-time employees bonuses every year.
It's just worth mentioning, they really fought unionizing. So, just as a thing, just because she referenced it.
They're leftists. That's what they do.
Even when they're delivering millions of views. I know that they're kind of cheap, and Cenk usually doesn't like it when people negotiate with him. So I said, sure, I want to work for TYT full-time, but it depends on the offer, which, by the way, you should always ask for an offer before you pledge loyalty to anyone or any company.
She's 100% right, by the way. Never just accept a job, ever. They always respond and always push and bargain, because they're doing that with you, even if it doesn't feel like that.
No. Everyone knows it's a progressive leftist working class conscious principle that you take everything your employer says on faith and you just accept whatever they give you, because it is a privilege.
Look, I'm talking about men.
Money. If you haven't subscribed to the damn channel, do it.
Thank you, Rick Side, for the $5. And yes,
you,
subscribe to the damn channel.
Subscribe to the damn channel. That's the news. That's going to be the new thing. Okay, it's not going to be donate to sports. Subscribe to the damn channel.
I mean, it's by the way, there's a very good chance that it upset him so much because it was a woman responding, because he does, and it's been a thing people have talked about who've left, that he does kind of view Anna as like a little sister or like a friend who works there, and like a girl who's like, and so having women respond like this, like men, like that's fuck.
Hey guys, we're five subs away from 900. Let's hit 900 for the end of the stream, okay? If you haven't subscribed to the channel, first of all, how dare you? But secondly,
absolutely,
subscribe. Seriously, shame. Subscribe to the channel. We are 5 away from 900, which means only 100 away from, help me, Brooks, I can't do math, 900 and plus 100.
What?
Which is what we need for...
We need 105 in order to get to monetization.
Yes, exactly.
And absolutely, we have 100 people here who are not subscribed. So just fucking do that. It takes 2 seconds. It means nothing.
I think we have 200 people here who are not subscribed. They're just mocking us.
Yeah, they do. They're terrible.
My view.
They're probably Young Turks fans.
Oh.
That's who doesn't subscribe.
We'll call them tits from now on. Young Turks fans are tits. Okay?
Young Turks was always a crap name anyway. It's like I get it in the sense of like, oh, the Young Turks. And it's like, yeah, but didn't they genocide?
Loyalty wasn't a given. All this to say, I'm not sad to leave TYT behind, especially now, with, of course, the exception of the Damage Report with John Idarola, who I care about,
like John,
and I think is so talented.
What is he doing?
But we live in a time of right-wing...
Like, seriously, what is John going to fucking do at this point?
Monsters, authoritarians, and yes, fascists. And anyone capitulating to their framework about human rights, about policing, around militarism, is not serious about liberation or democracy. Please, never watch anyone who can't admit when they're wrong. Never watch anyone who tells you that their strategy is right and that they are the way, the truth, the light. Never listen to anyone who doesn't have a sense of humor when they are acting like a bitch. I am one person with a scrappy YouTube channel who pieces together my annual living. I have a fraction of the following of TYT, which is a $1 million media company. The idea that they choose to focus on me or other leftist creators in their field is honestly really disheartening and very revealing. Look, I wish the best for the people of TYT, but as for the main hosts, I kind of just wish them peace, because it's been a long, long road with many skeletons in many closets, and honestly, I don't think they know where that road is going. And it's...
I think she's fucking spot on.
Hi,
a happy thought.
Oh, I don't have a happy thought, but I have a secret to tell you.
No, it's about a happy thought. Hello?